I still remember the silence. Not the kind that lingers after an argument, but the kind that follows someone walking out of your life without a goodbye. No explanations. No reasons. Just the soft creak of a door closing, and the echo it leaves behind in your chest. My name is Daniel, 33 years old, a graphic designer based in Seattle. And until last winter, I thought I had life figured out. A steady job. A small apartment overlooking the lake. And her, Ava. She was sunlight on stormy mornings, laughter in long traffic jams, the quiet hand that held mine when I didn't know I needed it. We met in the most ordinary way. A coffee shop, two people reaching for the same muffin, literally. She smiled, apologized, and let me take it. I offered to split it. That was Ava. Generous, warm, unpredictable. We talked for an hour that day. The muffin never got eaten. 6 months later, she moved in. Ava was a writer, but not a published one. She scribbled in old notebooks, left notes in the margins of novels, and whispered story ideas to herself while cooking pasta. She didn't care about success, not in the traditional way. She cared about meaning, about connection, about making people feel something real. And somehow, she made me feel like the most real version of myself. Our life wasn't perfect, no one's is. We argued. I worked too much. She disappeared into her own world sometimes. But we always found our way back. Until we didn't. It was a Friday. Cold, gray sky. I remember because I had spilled coffee on my laptop that morning and spent half the day in panic mode. When I got home, the apartment smelled like her perfume, jasmine and vanilla. The lights were off. The plants she always forgot to water were still sitting in the windowsill. And her keys were on the counter. No note. No voicemail. No sign of a break-in or accident. Just absence. A heavy, echoing absence. I called her phone. Straight to voicemail. I messaged her friends. No one knew anything. Her social media. Deleted. Like she had been erased, not just from my life, but from existence. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I filed a missing person report. The police did what they could, but there was no sign of foul play. No evidence of anything at all. Just one quiet vanishing act. People told me to move on. To forget. That maybe she wasn't who I thought she was. But they didn't know her. Not like I did. Or, maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't know her either. That thought haunted me the most. Months passed. I stopped calling. I started eating again. I went back to work. But the question stayed, heavy and shapeless, like fog. Until one rainy Tuesday evening, an envelope arrived at my door. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting. That was the first time I cried in months. Inside wasn't a letter, but a list, 10 places, written in order. Cities, towns, parks. The last one was a mountain in Utah we once talked about hiking, but never did. There was no explanation. Just a simple note at the bottom, go. You'll understand. And just like that, my life began to change again. Not because she came back. But because for the first time since she left, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. I didn't know what I was walking into. But I knew one thing, she hadn't vanished. She had left me a path. And I was going to follow it. Even if it destroyed me. I didn't leave the apartment for 3 days after the letter arrived. It sat on my desk, folded and weathered, like it had already lived through 100 hands before reaching mine. I read the list of places over and over. Cities we'd passed on road trips. Parks Ava mentioned once while brushing her teeth. A coffee shop in a small town in Oregon. None of it made sense, but then again, neither did she, leaving me without a word. I guess I always knew Ava carried things she never said out loud. There were moments, quiet pauses in conversation, the sudden far-off look in her eyes when I brought up family, or the way she always flinched slightly at hospital sirens. She laughed easily but didn't let people close easily. Even with me, there were parts of her I never touched. I was too afraid to ask the wrong question, to chase the light out of her. Maybe that was the problem. The day after I finally stepped outside, I drove to the first place on the list, a lake cabin in Montana we once visited during winter. We had stayed just 2 nights, snowed in and wrapped in a single blanket, playing cards and pretending the world didn't exist. That weekend had felt like forever in a moment. The cabin hadn't changed. But it wasn't hers anymore. A kind elderly couple lived there now. When I showed them the note and Ava's name, the woman tilted her head. She was here last fall. Alone. Said she used to come with someone she loved. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I thanked them and sat by the lake for hours, staring at the frozen water, trying to imagine her sitting there alone, wrapped in the same silence she had left behind in our apartment. Each place on the list was the same, familiar but empty. Her presence lingered like a scent, a shadow, a fingerprint on glass. Always recent. Always just missed. With every stop, more questions surfaced. Why did she leave? Why these places? Why now? And the biggest one of all, was she sick? That thought hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Ava had always been private about her health. She brushed off headaches. Never saw a doctor. Once, she fainted in the kitchen and laughed it off like it was nothing. I should have seen it. I should have known. But love can be blinding. Especially when you want to believe everything will be okay. As I drove toward the 4th place on the list, a bookstore in Portland, weird dreams began creeping into my sleep. Ava calling my name but never facing me. Ava running barefoot through rain, her face half-lit, always just out of reach. The worst was the dream where she was sitting in our apartment, writing, crying, and then quietly tearing the pages out of her journal one by one. I woke up that night gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Something wasn't right. Not just with her, but with me. The more I retraced her path, the more I realized how much of our relationship I had taken for granted. She had been asking for something all along. Space. Honesty. Maybe a promise I never kept. I was too focused on stability, on providing, working, doing the right thing. But maybe what she needed most was something I never thought to give. The freedom to be seen, not fixed. That thought haunted me as I stepped into the bookstore. The owner, a middle-aged man with a tired smile, recognized her immediately. "She left a note here," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope from behind the counter. I opened it slowly. Inside was a Polaroid photo of us, me, Ava, and a stray cat we had rescued on a rainy night. On the back, in her handwriting, "You taught me how to stay. But I had to teach myself how to leave. Keep going, Daniel. The last stop matters." My hands shook. My chest ached. But I wasn't going to stop. I kept the photo in my wallet after that. It felt like a piece of her soul, a glimpse of what we were before things cracked and silence replaced conversation. The bookstore had been stop number 4. There were 6 more on her list. But something had changed. Now, I wasn't just following her trail. I was chasing answers I wasn't sure I was ready for. 2 days later, I reached stop 5, a clinic in Boise. Not a hospital. A quiet, private wellness center tucked between office buildings. My chest tightened the moment I saw it. Ava had always feared hospitals, hated the smell, the lights. I'd heard her say once, "If I'm ever sick, I want peace, not beeping machines." A receptionist greeted me kindly. Her name tag said Carly. When I mentioned Ava's name, her face shifted, something between recognition and concern. "She asked us not to share details," Carly said softly. "But she did leave something, in case you came." Another envelope. My hands trembled. Inside was a short note, handwritten in Ava's looping style, "This isn't where the story ends, Daniel. But it's where I found the beginning of the truth. Keep going. There's something you need to know about me. About us." Truth. About us? It felt like standing on a cliff, knowing the edge was near but unable to see through the fog. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a nearby motel, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we shared, the nights she cried quietly after nightmares, the sudden anxiety in crowded places, her habit of locking every door twice. There were signs, always signs. But I had chosen comfort over curiosity. Maybe she had secrets. Maybe I was too wrapped up in my own world to ask. The next morning, I got a call from Ava's closest friend, Clara. We hadn't spoken since the day she vanished. Clara was always protective, sometimes distant with me. But now, her voice was gentler. "I know you're following the list," she said without greeting. "Ava asked me not to reach out. But, there's something you should hear." She invited me to meet her in Denver, the 6th place on the list. We met in a quiet tea shop. Clara looked tired. Her hair pulled into a loose bun, her fingers clutching a worn leather journal. "I kept this for her," she said, sliding it toward me. "She didn't want you to see it then. But now, I think it's time." I hesitated, staring at the worn cover. Opening it felt like opening a vault I wasn't sure I had the right to. But my hands moved anyway. Inside were Ava's thoughts. Not poems or stories this time. But raw, real entries. Pages of pain, reflection, even joy. And fear. A lot of fear. One passage read, "Sometimes I want to tell him everything. That I'm not who he thinks I am. That the person he fell in love with was someone built from survival, not truth. But I'm scared. What if he sees me differently? What if the darkness inside me scares him away?" I looked up. Clara was watching me. "She battled a lot," she said softly. "Her past wasn't easy. And she never let anyone too close. Except you. But loving you scared her more than being alone. The stakes were rising, and fast. Ava wasn't just running from me. She was running from her own story. And now, I wasn't just a man chasing love, I was unraveling a life built on things never said. There were still 4 places left. But now every mile wasn't just distance, it was emotional weight. I could feel it building. With every secret revealed, I got closer to understanding who Ava really was. But the question kept haunting me, what if the final truth is something I can't forgive? I drove through the night after leaving Clara. Her words echoed louder than the engine, she loved you, Daniel. But love wasn't enough to silence her past. Every mile felt heavier than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it could stop my thoughts from spiraling. What was she hiding? What could possibly be so dark, so painful, that she'd choose to vanish instead of tell me? The 7th stop was a rehabilitation center in New Mexico. Not for physical injuries, for trauma survivors. I sat in the parking lot for hours before going in, watching people come and go. Each face held stories I couldn't begin to imagine. When I finally went inside, the woman at the front desk recognized Ava's name immediately. She volunteered here, she said. She didn't speak much. But she helped people talk when they couldn't. Especially the young ones. My breath caught in my chest. Ava never told me she volunteered anywhere, let alone in a place like this. But of course she did. She had always been drawn to broken things. Maybe because she understood what it felt like to be one of them. She asked us to give this to someone if he ever showed up looking for her, the woman added, handing me a flash drive. I didn't wait. I found the nearest motel, locked the door, plugged in my laptop, and opened the file. It was a video. Grainy, dimly lit. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, wearing a sweater I remembered buying her one Christmas. Her eyes were tired. Her voice was calm, but trembling. Daniel, she began, if you're watching this. I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I couldn't love you the way you deserved, not while carrying the weight of who I used to be. She looked away from the camera for a moment, then back. I was abused. For years. Before you. Before the life I built with you. It left scars no one could see. Some days I felt fine. Most days I felt like I was pretending. You made me feel safe, but even that scared me. Because safety was never familiar. And I hated that. She wiped a tear from her cheek, then gave a soft, heartbreaking laugh. I thought I could run from my past by building a life with you. But it caught up. It always does. And I started to feel like a lie in your arms. So I had to leave, not to disappear, but to heal. Properly. Fully. And if you're still watching, I hope that means you understand. My hand went to my mouth. The screen blurred through my tears. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was grief. For everything I never knew. For everything she had to survive. And for the helplessness of loving someone who couldn't love herself enough to stay. She ended the video with a line that hit harder than anything else. If you truly love me, please don't try to fix me. Just find peace with the truth. The real me. And maybe one day, I'll be strong enough to find you again. The flash drive dropped from my hand. I sat in that motel room for hours, body still, mind screaming. I wanted to scream at someone. At fate. At the years lost to silence. But mostly, I just wanted her to know I was still here. There were 3 places left on her list. I didn't know what they held. But I knew one thing for sure now, I wasn't chasing Ava anymore. I was walking the road she had paved for both of us. And if this road ended in goodbye, I would still be proud I followed it. The next day, I didn't eat. Didn't speak. Didn't sleep. The video had pulled the ground from under me, but it also gave me clarity. It was the first time I truly saw Ava, not as the woman I imagined, but as the one who had been quietly breaking beside me. And yet, despite all that, something inside me felt unfinished. Like there was still a thread I hadn't pulled. The 8th place on her list was a rural art retreat in Arizona. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a painting she left behind, or someone she confided in, but what I found was something I couldn't have prepared for. When I arrived, the receptionist at the retreat looked surprised. "You're Daniel?" she asked, cautiously. I nodded. She hesitated, then said, "There's someone you need to meet." She led me into a quiet studio at the back of the property. Inside, soft music played, and the walls were covered in abstract art, haunting, chaotic, beautiful. At the far end of the room stood a young woman in her 20s, holding a brush. She turned around. And I froze. She looked just like Ava. Not exactly. A little shorter, a little younger. But the same eyes. The same half-smile. The same tension in the shoulders. "I'm Lila," she said, reading my shock. "Ava's sister." I didn't even know Ava had a sister. "She didn't talk about me," Lila said gently. "I wasn't allowed in her life. Not after what happened." The air turned heavier. Lila invited me to sit. She poured tea, but neither of us touched it. I couldn't stop staring. Same voice timbre. Same quiet grace. "She was 16 when she left home," Lila said. "I was 10. I didn't see her again for nearly 12 years. I leaned forward, needing answers. "Why?" Lila looked away. "Our Father." 2 words. Enough to say everything. He was dangerous. Controlling. Especially with Ava. She took the worst of it. And when she ran, she tried to take me with her. But he stopped her. She blamed herself for leaving me behind. A lump formed in my throat. All the pieces began falling into place, her fear of hospitals, her silence, the nightmares. She carried that guilt into every relationship, Lila continued. Including with you. She never believed she deserved to be happy. And now? I asked. Where is she? Lila paused. She's been staying off-grid. Writing, painting. Healing. But. I spoke to her 2 days ago. She knows you've been following the list. Why didn't she stop me? Because part of her wants you to find her. And part of her is terrified you will. I sat in stunned silence. Ava's life had more layers than I'd ever known. And now, a sister I never knew existed had pulled the story wide open again. But there was something else in Lila's voice. A hesitation. A warning. "There's more," she said. I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Lila looked me dead in the eye. "She's not just hiding from her past, Daniel. She's hiding from someone. Someone real. Someone dangerous." My stomach turned. "She reached out to me 6 months ago, terrified. Said someone from our past had found her. A man who used to control both of us. She didn't say his name. Just that she had to disappear, completely. So this list," I whispered. "It's not just for closure. It's a map. But not just for you, it's also for him. Ava's been playing a dangerous game, trying to stay one step ahead. The walls seemed to close in. Everything shifted in an instant. This wasn't just a story about love or healing. This was survival. And I wasn't the only one following her trail. I didn't sleep that night. Lila's words replayed in my mind like a warning siren I couldn't silence. She's not just hiding from her past. She's hiding from someone. The man. The shadow behind her silence. Suddenly, the list wasn't just emotional breadcrumbs, it was a shield, a delay, a misdirection. Ava was trying to protect herself. And maybe, somehow, protect me too. I was angry. Not at her. But at what the world had done to her. And furious that I had spent so long chasing her pain without realizing someone was still trying to cause it. The 9th location on the list was a small mountain cabin near Zion National Park in Utah. Ava and I had dreamed of going once, but never made it. It was secluded, off the grid. Lila confirmed she was likely there. I packed up at sunrise. I didn't call. I didn't tell anyone. If Ava truly wanted to be alone, I'd respect that, but if she was in danger, I couldn't walk away. The road turned to gravel. The GPS lost signal. By late afternoon, I was on foot, climbing the trail to the cabin with a thudding heart and a head full of what-ifs. And then I saw it, tucked between 2 pines, smoke curling from the chimney. And her. Standing outside, chopping wood. Hair longer now. Face thinner. But unmistakably Ava. She didn't see me at first. I didn't want to startle her, so I stopped a few yards away and called her name. "Ava," she froze. Then slowly, she turned. When her eyes met mine, there was a flicker of something, shock, pain, and maybe even relief. She dropped the axe. I didn't rush her. I waited. After a long moment, she walked toward me. Not fast. Not with open arms. But not with fear either. "I thought you might come," she said, voice quiet but steady. "I had to," I replied. "You left me, but you also led me." She gave a soft, exhausted laugh. "I didn't know if you'd make it this far." I didn't either. We sat on the porch, wrapped in silence. I didn't ask anything at first. I just sat with her. Finally, I said what had been choking me for weeks: "You don't have to tell me everything. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when I hated how much it hurt." She looked at me then. Fully. Honestly. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, Daniel," she said. I left because I thought I would destroy you. And then, slowly, she told me everything. About the man who had resurfaced. About the threats. The stalking. How she had gone to the police but was told there wasn't enough to pursue. How she fled, not just to heal, but to hide. To protect the one person who gave her peace. Me. Every word felt like a blade. But not toward her. Toward the version of the world that let her suffer in silence. I was so tired of being afraid, she whispered. Of looking over my shoulder. Of dragging my past into our future. I reached out and took her hand. You're not dragging it alone anymore, I said. Ava cried then, really cried. Not the quiet, trembling kind I used to see in the dark. But the kind that comes when walls finally fall. We stayed in that cabin for 3 days. She showed me her paintings. Her journals. Her progress. She had been rebuilding herself from the inside out, and now, for the first time, she was letting someone witness it. But just when I thought the storm had passed, the twist came. On the 4th morning, a ranger knocked on the door. Ava stiffened instantly. Are you Ava Layton? He asked. She nodded slowly. I'm afraid there's been a breach in a protective order. Someone matching the description of your former guardian was seen nearby 2 nights ago. He's being pursued, but we need to relocate you, immediately. The color drained from her face. The danger wasn't over. But she didn't run this time. She looked at me, her voice steady. I'm not hiding anymore. Not if you're with me. I stood beside her, heart pounding, hand in hers. Then let's face it. Together. They relocated us that afternoon. We didn't have time to pack everything, just the basics. A duffel bag. Her journals. My camera. The ranger drove us down the mountain, and as the cabin disappeared behind the trees, Ava squeezed my hand tightly. Not from fear this time, but from clarity. For the first time since this journey began, we weren't running separately. They moved us to a small safe house, closer to town. Temporary. Quiet. Heavily monitored. The man she feared, her former guardian, had been spotted, but not caught. The threat was still real, but so was something stronger, Ava's decision not to live in fear anymore. The next few days weren't easy. She had nightmares again, but she talked this time. I listened. She told me things I never imagined she'd carry, stories no one should carry alone. But through all of it, she never once told me to leave. That alone felt like progress. I learned how to show up in ways I didn't before. Not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't try to fix her. I just stood beside her. Quietly. Consistently. The breakthrough came one evening as we sat watching the sunset from the back porch of the safe house. The sky was painted in warm oranges and golds, like the universe was finally exhaling with us. I want to go back to Seattle, she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? She nodded. Not to hide. But to start again. On my terms. Our terms. We returned 2 weeks later, quietly, cautiously. The man who haunted her past was arrested in a nearby state after being caught violating a different protective order. Just like that, the legal fight began. But Ava didn't back down. With help, she pressed charges, testified, and confronted what once terrified her. And I was there, every step of the way. In time, the fear didn't fully vanish, but it didn't rule her anymore. She joined a support group. Started painting again. She even published a short story about healing after trauma. It didn't go viral, but it touched lives. That's all she ever wanted. We didn't jump back into us right away. We took our time. Built trust again. I learned to love her with no timeline. She learned to receive that love without guilt. Months later, she moved back in. Same apartment. Same lake view. New energy. One morning, she handed me a new envelope. My heart skipped. Don't worry, she laughed. It's not another journey. Inside was a sketch. The two of us. Holding hands on a porch. Not the one from the cabin, but an older version of us, gray-haired, smiling. Safe. Together. Let's build this future, she said softly. And that's what we're doing. No drama. No mystery. Just ordinary days stitched together with understanding, patience, and more love than ever before.